It would take a miracle for Manoj's prophecy regarding my sermon to come true. So if you can figure that out, you can be discouraged at this point. So who's in charge of this country? Well, there's really not a simple answer to that question. I suppose you could say it's the Queen, because we do have a reigning monarch, right? Right? On February 2, 1952, Elizabeth Alexandra Mary Windsor was officially proclaimed Queen of Canada. That's Queen Elizabeth II. But then again, we are not under an absolute monarchy, but rather under a constitutional monarchy where Parliament supposedly has supreme power. The World Factbook produced by the United States CIA lists actually 31 different types of governments that operate in the countries and territories of our world. And interestingly enough, it's actually changed how Canada has listed in the last couple of years. It lists Canada as not only a constitutional monarchy, but also as a parliamentary democracy and a federation. So now you know. But hey, if you really want to find a complicated government system, you need to check out Antarctica and something called the Antarctic Treaty. It pretty well defies classification. Just try to figure out who's in charge of Antarctica. Good luck. But like it or not, here in Canada, we do have a queen. We have a monarch. And while perhaps many Canadians are mostly indifferent regarding the role and the place of the Queen in connection with Canada, there are certainly those in favor and those opposed to Canada continuing to have a monarch. And the debate rages on, if you follow it, at times quite passionately. Probably many folks simply choose to just stay clear of the whole debate, knowing that discussions in the political realm can tend or have a tendency to become kind of heated and also sort of personal. I always remember my mother telling about when she and my father moved to not their first home as a married couple, but their first non-college campus home as a married couple. It was in a place called Watson, Saskatchewan, the first place I ever lived. And they moved into their home there, and very shortly after, the next door neighbor invited my mother over, and she immediately set out the ground rules with her. She said to my mom, "We can be good neighbors, and we can be good friends, but there are two things that we will not be discussing: religion and politics." And of course, maintaining those two subjects on the conversation taboo list has long been considered generally advisable, right? I mean, it's a whole lot safer to talk about the weather than about something as potentially controversial and personal as religion and politics, or politics. But today I would like us to consider a verse from the Bible which suggests that we as Christians should discuss, we should speak up and talk about religion and politics on a global scale. And so I invite you to join me in Psalm 96. The verse I have in mind is verse 10. It's pretty well the only place we're going to go in the Bible here today. So Psalm 96, verse 10. You can find it and lock it in there. I want us to look at this verse and think about what it's saying to us. Psalm 96, verse 10. Psalmist says, Psalm 96, verse 10, "Say among the nations, the Lord reigns. The world also is firmly established. It shall not be moved. He shall judge the peoples righteously." All right, just to get our bearings here, Psalm 96 is one of what is called the royal psalms. It's one of the psalms which highlights God as the sovereign reigning king. And this psalm is based on part of the song that David wrote for the ceremony when the Ark of the Covenant was brought for the first time to the tabernacle in Jerusalem. But it's a little bit different the way it's arranged here in this psalm, in Psalm 96. And here in this psalm, it has a particularly outward and global kind of a focus. In fact, it is being called a missionary hymn for all ages. And so if you were to read through the psalm, a brief survey of the psalm reveals that the message is not intended to be confined just within the setting of God's people. So for example, if you were to read through that psalm, you would see some interesting things. It says in there, all the earth is invited to sing to the Lord. It says that his glory is to be declared among the nations. It says his wonders are to be declared among all peoples. The Lord is to be feared, it says, above all gods. It says that the families of the peoples are called to give the Lord glory. It says all the earth is to tremble before him, and he is depicted as coming to judge both the world and the peoples. It's a very global psalm. So while it is good and it is appropriate for us to meet here together as we are today as believers and praise and worship God, the context of this psalm challenges us to not simply stop there, but rather to push beyond the confines of our own walls and our own setting and extend this message everywhere to all people. Now, as we zoom in now, particularly on verse 10, we find an important three-part message which we are instructed to share among the nations. We're reminded here that as people who love and follow and belong to God, we do need to be willing to talk about religion. In fact, allow me to suggest that we need to talk about religion and politics. We need to talk about religion and science. And we need to talk about religion and justice. So let's look a little further into just what it is we're called here to speak up and share. Now, if religion and politics are sensitive subjects or topics on their own, what about combining the two? Oh, that tends to make people kind of nervous, right? According to Psalm 96:10, what are we Christians called to proclaim then in this touchy realm of religion and politics? Well, it says that we are called to proclaim that the Lord reigns. We are to inform and affirm that there is a divine king who is over all, who is ultimately in charge. Do you know how many independent countries there are in the world today? You know? How many countries of the world? How many? 834? That is drastically wrong. But thank you for guessing. Wow. We'd have to add a few more planets. But thank you. You know what? It really isn't a question that's easy to answer because it's always changing and it's dependent on how nations are classified and who recognizes them. Some countries recognize a country, someone else doesn't. Some organizations, the United Nations, might recognize, they might not. It's very hard. And so it's anywhere from 189 to 196. Some say for sure 195. The UN says 193. Some say it's over 200. Al says it's over 800. Who knows? But there's, 193, 196, somewhere in there. So I was wondering how many of those countries are under some form of a monarchy? What would you guess? What percentage of the countries are under a monarchy? Well, I spent far too much time trying to figure out an answer to that question. And I don't have an answer to that question. My only conclusion is simply that that is a difficult question to definitively answer. I think an educated guess is the best you could get because it gets really fuzzy. They may have a king or queen, but are they really under the king or queen? And it's difficult. But then I got thinking the real point and the important point is there is an answer to that question. And the answer is 100% because really all of them are under a monarch. Why? Because the Lord reigns. 100%. And yet the reality is most of the people of all those different nations, they don't even know that they have a king. And I wrote down when this happened because as pastors you do this. Everything that happens you think, I could use that sometime. So you write it down so you can remember it. So I wrote this down. It happened to me, the date was May 14, 2008. Write the stuff down, put it in a file, huge files. And because of the clearly imminent crash of my computer at the time, I know it was on its way out. I was trying to send all my emails back to SaskTel webmail by forwarding them out of Outlook. Okay, so I don't know about you, I got like thousands of emails. I never really get around to clearing them out. So I didn't want to lose them because there could be some important ones. So I was sending them all over, in groups of 10 at a time. So, this is a long process. And so, you get to the send to box and you start to type your email address. And you know how after you type the first few letters, it kind of thinks it knows where you're going and it will give you a suggestion. Is this the address you're trying to type? And instead of having to type out the whole address, you can just hit enter and say, yeah, that's the one, right? So I was doing that over and over and over again. And I found that usually by the time I typed the first 3 letters of my address, which is G-O-D, for Godsoe at sastel.net, usually it would pop up, Godsoe at sastel.net, and I wouldn't have to type it out. I could just hit enter. And so I was doing that over and over and over again, sending all these emails to protect my information. And at one point, I guess, as I was doing that and got efficient at that, I hit enter before it pulled up the option. And so what happened is Outlook tried to send those emails simply to God. Tried to send them to God. And I was struck by the message box that soon appeared on my screen, and that's why I wrote it down. This is what it said. I got this box on my computer screen that said, Microsoft Outlook does not recognize God. That's what it said. I thought I was always suspicious of that Bill Gates guy. But I thought, wow, doesn't recognize God. Well, you know what? God is there, whether Microsoft Outlook recognizes him or not. And likewise, I want to say to you that the Lord is reigning as king over all of the nations, whether people recognize him as their monarch or not. Now, when it comes to our queen in Canada, many people don't mind having her there as long as she doesn't really start trying to tell us what to do or really directing our affairs, right? Yeah, whatever, just stay over there in England and whatever, leave us alone. But our message needs to be that the Lord as a reigning king is more than just a traditional or nostalgic figurehead. A monarch with functioning power can have a huge impact on the lives of those who live within his or her realm. We're not called here to proclaim God as reigning in some sort of kind of far-off, symbolic, ceremonial, or uninvolved way. No, but when we say as Christians, when we say he reigns, we mean that he is interested and involved in what happens all around the globe as well as with us as individuals. We're saying that he takes responsibility toward us as his ruler, as our ruler, pardon me. So while many in this world are undoubtedly completely unaware of his existence, there are others who simply choose to believe that he doesn't exist. And there are still others who, while accepting the possibility of his existence, they choose not to accept the idea that he is actually the reigning king with any kind of authority. And what's interesting is that God allows the individuals in this earthly realm to make that choice, to not acknowledge him, to not honor him. And God doesn't force them, he doesn't coerce them to accept his place as the Messiah. But what he does do is he passionately works to invite and welcome them to become loyal, obedient citizens of his kingdom. And that's what we, his loyal Christian subjects, are called to help do when we say among the nations, the Lord reigns. That's what it's about. You see, we are not called to seek to gain control of government systems so that God's laws and practices can be enforced on the people of the world's nations. That's not what we're called to. Rather, our primary goal is to seek to draw people's attention to the fact that there is a divine king who reigns, and that cooperating with his rule is the best way to go. Yes, we should stand up for morality. Yes, we should stand up for Christian principles. But we need to be careful that we do it God's way. God's way is by compelling invitation and example rather than by controlling force. Do people want a king? Not necessarily. Because this is an international congregation. Many of you have lived in all different, there's no corners in a circle, but all around the world, right? And how many people have suffered under the rule of cruel tyrants, of oppressive regimes, or maybe extravagant monarchs? How many people have seen the corruption and the greed that too often seems to get the best of those who are in power? How many people have become cynical or disillusioned about the government system that they are under? Even people here in Canada. People too often, they feel powerless, they feel unrepresented, even perhaps betrayed by their rulers and leaders. How many have lost faith in the system and what it is supposed to do? In fact, you have to wonder if that wasn't the case for the people of a city or a town in Colombia called Florissant, who at one time, truth is, this is true, they elected as their mayor an individual named Paco Bell. And what's interesting about that is this individual they elected as their mayor, Paco Bell, just happened to literally be a donkey. They elected a donkey, a donkey, as their mayor. And what kind of leadership are you looking for there? You know, maybe it says a lot about people's opinion about what's this role of mayor and government systems, right? And that is just ripe for so many interesting comments, but we just leave it right there. So is it good news for people to learn that the Lord reigns? Oh, great. Just what I need. Somebody else to exert his authority over me. Yeah, that's good news. Happy to hear that. I want someone else to have power over me. Well, the truth is we know that it's good news because we know of who he is who reigns, right? Because of the characteristics of this Lord who is king. We know it's good news. And that means that beyond then just for people to know that he reigns, people need to know about the he who reigns. Because this God reigns lovingly and unselfishly, because he reigns with the best interests of those in his realm in his mind. Because of he's powerful enough to actually help and defend and protect his subjects. Because of that, this news that he reigns can be the best news that people could ever hear. This isn't just another ruler out for celebrity status or power or wealth. Saying that the Lord reigns among the nations is about sharing a wonderfully good message for everyone. And oh, how this world needs a powerful, loving, wise, fair, consistent, trustworthy monarch. Couldn't we use that? And he's not just some kind of idealistic candidate hoping to get voted in, oh, it'll be great. He already reigns. So if it's such good news, it should be easy for us to say it among the nations, right? It should be easy. Well, it's easy to praise the Lord and affirm that he reigns in the company of fellow believers who already accept and appreciate God's role and reign as king. Is it pretty easy to stand here and say it right now? Yeah, y'all are pretty nice people. Probably not going to throw anything at me yet. Go too long maybe, but not right now. But beyond that, it doesn't always prove to be so simple. In fact, I expect it wasn't particularly easy for the people back in the times of the psalmist who wrote this to share this message with the surrounding nations, these nations who had their own gods and frankly probably resented Israel's presence among them. I don't think it was any easier back then. So how do we talk religion and politics to the world? How can we effectively tell them the good news that the Lord reigns? Well, at least in countries like ours where we enjoy the blessing of freedom of speech and religion, we can almost do whatever we want. We can hold meetings and we can preach and we can publish materials in whatever format we want. But what about in those places in the world where they worship a different God or different gods? What about those places where they practice a different religion? What about those places with governments or rulers who have enacted laws protecting only one religion, or where they have enacted laws forbidding any kind of religious propagation? And what about talking religion and politics, proclaiming that the Lord reigns, even right here in good old Canada, our country? I was at a seminar a few years ago. It was in 2009. And they said there that 82% of Canada's population is considered secular. 82%. What about telling it here? Flip out all kinds of things. An article I had in my files from April 11, 2009 reported on a survey of 1,000 Canadians who indicated that while a third of them claimed to be praying more often because of the poor economy. It's interesting how that works. Said the percentage of Canadians who even believed in God had dropped. It kept dropping, and by 2009 it was down to 71%. So what do? You could go stand on the street corner, pick one in Toronto, and stand there, and you could say, "Hey, the Lord reigns. Hello, the Lord reigns." But very few, if any, are actually going to listen to you. You can rent a hall, you can preach it. But the reality is, a reality we don't always like to accept, that very few who don't already know God will actually come to hear. Isn't that the case? Is it important that we say among the nations that God reigns? It is. How can we as Seventh-day Adventist Christians best go about doing that? Well, for places and peoples that have little or no Adventist Christian presence, we do things like send dedicated missionaries to go live among the people, build friendship and trust to eventually open the door of opportunity to be able to tell them about their loving King. And it's not usually as simple as just waltzing in and saying, "Hey, here I am, you lucky people. I'm here to tell you that you have a king and he reigns." It doesn't usually work quite that way. It's about consistently living out the principles of the Lord's rulership to demonstrate the benefits of embracing his reign and his kingship, his kingdom. Think of countries like Mongolia. You know, in 1991, there were no Seventh-day Adventist Christians in Mongolia. When a couple named Brad and Kathy Jolly. Kathy was the older sister of a kid in my class I grew up with. And they moved there to Mongolia as Adventist frontier missionaries. 2 years later, after 2 years of working there, they were able to have their first baptism of a Seventh-day Adventist Christian in Mongolia. And then I read a report that said 17 years later, 2 years for the first baptism, 17 years later, there was a little more than 1,000 baptized members in that country who now know and believe that the Lord reigns. It took time. You know, some countries are not open to missionaries, so the missionaries gain access to live in those countries maybe as students or as skilled workers. In countries that are closed to Christianity, we may be able to enter through satellite programs or through websites, or most successfully, usually with radio programs through the Ministry of Adventist World Radio. Sometimes the way to announce that the Lord reigns begins with development and relief work, you know, like through ADRA, the Adventist Development and Relief Agency. See, to effectively be able to tell the nations the good news about God's kingship means that in many places we have to be wise, we have to be patient, we have to be very careful and intentional, or you can lose your opportunity. And this call that we find in Psalm 96:10 should remind us of what our primary objective is. You know, we're all over the world, but I hope that we are not in those places all around the world doing the things that we are doing. I hope we're not there simply just to operate a really well-respected hospital. I hope we're not there just to really teach people to speak English very well in conversation. I hope that we're not there just to provide relief and development or just to promote a healthier lifestyle. Those things are important, but ultimately, hopefully, we need to be there with the purpose of prayerfully and carefully gaining the opportunity to be able to show and share the great news that our Lord reigns. That's why we got to be there, or else who cares about the hospital? Who cares if you can speak English? We got to be there so ultimately people can know about our King. And so it's a combination of using words and actions along with a very impeccable and wise sense of timing. And you know what? When you think about it, it's really the same deal for giving this message here at home. It's really not so different. Because yes, thankfully we enjoy the freedom to be able to openly say that the Lord reigns. But it's more than just putting it on our church sign or on our bulletin. It's more than just making some kind of public statement. It seems to me that if we are serious about saying that the Lord reigns, then that means being serious about how we live, and how we act, and how we go about business as individuals, as a congregation, how we do it as a denomination. We need to ask ourselves, do our words, do our actions reveal that we really believe that he reigns? Or do they show that we're operating really more on the basis of our own wisdom and our own opinions and our own plans? Do we tend to simply follow the predominant outlook, thinking, and standard of society around us? That's what the church has struggled with all through its history. Is that what we do? Following what is acceptable to us? Or do we order ourselves based on what is acceptable to God? Do our choices and actions and attitudes reveal submission to God's reigning authority? Or do we instead just order ourselves based on what is acceptable to us? Are we submissive to God's authority no matter how inconvenient it is or uncomfortable it is or difficult it might be to follow his ways? You know, proclaiming that he reigns means accepting that he is in charge, and that means following his rules. That means letting his word be the first word and the last word and the ultimate determining word in all of our decisions. And it means that the standard for maintaining citizenship in his kingdom, the standard for maintaining membership in his church, will not be the lowest standard that we're willing to accept. You know? Whatever we can approve of or live with, whatever we can put up with, that shouldn't be the standard for his kingdom. Rather, it should only be the standard that he accepts and he approves. It means that those who have submitted to his rules should and will be different in some ways from the people out in general society who do not accept that the Lord is the king and reject his kingship. It means that not just anything goes. It means that not everything is okay among us. And when the reality that he reigns is a reality in our lives, then it will actually make a difference in our lives. It will make a difference in our thinking, in our interactions with one another, and our functioning. That's how we can truly show that he reigns. And so whether people accept the reality of God's reign or not, he still reigns. People may worship other gods. They may deny his existence. They may even object to his right to rule. Who are you to say that? But we are still called to proclaim the positive truth that he reigns. We are called to talk religion and politics among the peoples of our nations. And that's a call to take an active interest in the global mission outreach of our denomination in its various forms, and also a call to lend meaningful support. And it's a call to do your part as well in your local setting where you and I live, in our local setting, to help live out a demonstration of the principles of the Lord's kingdom. Not just a call for out there, it's a call for here. It's a call to look for ways to connect with people, for ways to help create those opportunities to show and tell the good news that the Lord reigns. Because, how people need to know that there is good and hopeful news in the realm of religion and politics because the Lord reigns. People need to know that. But that's not all we're called to share in Psalm 96:10. The next part of the message is that the world also is firmly established. It shall not be moved. So here we wade into this realm of religion and science. And even in the face of earthquakes and tsunamis and mudslides and other natural disasters, even in the face of concerns about possible global warming and environmental challenges, dealing with pollution and the depletion of non-renewable resources, in the face of all of that, we are called to give the encouraging word that this planet has been set in place and it is staying put. And that's important because people don't always feel so secure on this planet that can at times seem very unpredictable, very dangerous, frankly. And also there are those who hold the theory or worry about the possibility that this planet's demise may come about in some kind of catastrophic explosion. Or maybe we'll be wiped out by some unfortunately drastic collision with some rogue comet, and boom, we're all gone. That's it. This part of the message here in Psalm 96:10 is really a call to highlight the Lord as our creator and sustainer. Our planet home is not just here as an accident of mathematical happenstance. It is not merely held in position by gravitational pull. No, the Bible is very clear on the Earth's origin and future. This little planet was created by the power and planned intention of a divine being, and this creator God not only personally designed our world, but he has infinitely long-term plans for this place, for our future. what that means is it's not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere. Well, actually it is, in a sense, going somewhere. Right? Because the Earth, as you know, orbits the sun at a speed of 107,229 kilometers per hour. I know you knew that before you came to church. Takes it 365 days, 5 hours, 48 minutes, and 46 seconds to complete one lap around the sun. So it's moving. Now, in the Milky Way galaxy, the sun is positioned about 2/3 of the way out from the center of the edge of the galactic disk and about 20 light years north of the galactic plane. Write that down if it's meaningful to you. Along with that, consider that the sun is traveling at a speed of about 719,000 kilometers per hour. Ooh. Along with this, the Milky Way galaxy and the Andromeda galaxy are approaching each other at about 400 kilometers per second. As well, the Milky Way galaxy is orbiting among a local group of galaxies, and this local group of galaxies is racing towards something called the Great Attractor. Right? You know this stuff? So in the end, have you figured it out? Have you got the speed? Forgot your calculator? Thank God for the people that spend the time that they have to do this kind of stuff. It has been calculated, if you put it all together, that the Earth is arguably moving at a speed of approximately 2,160,000 kilometers per hour. Fasten your seatbelts. Hold on to something. We are moving. In other words, this Earth is just poking along compared to the speed of light. Isn't that amazing? What's really amazing is that it's going awfully fast to just basically stay put, isn't it? So the next time someone tells you to get moving, you can respond, "We are! Man, I'm going so fast! Over 2 million kilometers an hour!" It's amazing to be going that fast, and here we are, feeling like we're going nowhere, which is in a good way, in a good way. But the fact that our world has stayed in place, that it still spins and follows its appointed path around the sun with precision, that fact is a testament to the sustaining power and care of our Lord who reigns over it. And so we need to talk religion and science to the world. We need to uphold the Creator God who made the heavens and the earth. We aren't just here by chance. God created this planet for our home, and you know what? The offer still stands in spite of the mess we've left it in. Since this is our home, we should take an interest in helping take care of the place for now. However, we also know from the Bible that the Lord is coming back here to take his people away for a while, as in 1,000 years. And I kind of think it's kind of like one of those extreme home makeover programs. Seen that? Those shows, you know, where they take the family and they temporarily relocate them somewhere else and they go in to do a major renovation. Well, God is planning a complete renovation of this world to bring it back to brand new status, brand new condition. And the remarkable thing is that when his people move back in, he's going to move back in with them. What does that mean? That means that rather than being all panicked and worried about Earth's future, we have the opportunity to share some good and hopeful news in this realm of religion and science. We can assure the people of the nations that our planet won't go spinning off out of control off course somewhere. It's not going to be disintegrated in some kind of deadly collision. Why? Because God has eternal plans for this place. And so we can point people to the loving Creator who holds us in his care. And we can direct their attention to the soon coming return of this reigning Creator who's going to gather together his loyal subjects for a little paradise vacation away from this place for a little bit. And that brings us to the last part of the message. Amen? There's hope. Outlined in Psalm 96:10, where it says that he shall judge the peoples righteously. And here we're called to talk religion and justice to the peoples of this world, the nations. And again, is that good news? Yeah, this is good news. Because justice is about sorting things out according to truth. It's about putting a stop to wrong. It's about standing up for those who are abused or unfairly oppressed. Only a God with perfect and complete knowledge of all of the information a full understanding of all of the motives and all of the background factors and influences and opportunities. Only such a God is in such a position to be able to sort out what should really happen for all of eternity. This is an important message because far too often in this world, judgment is not carried out righteously, right? In spite of perhaps the best intentions of those in the system. It's not always carried out fairly and equitably as is promised here. I cut out this article from June 11, 2007 that talked about cases of cultural honor killing, how they're taking place more and more in Canada even. And it cited some references. March 2004, a 14-year-old female rape victim was strangled to death by her father and brother because she had supposedly tarnished the family name. Oh, you were a victim, so we're going to kill you and make you a victim because you were a victim. Does that make sense to you? Then in April, a man brutally killed his wife and daughter after finding out that his brother had previously molested them. Kind of think if you're going to kill someone, not saying you should. I'm just saying, if you're going to. It's crazy, right? Teenage girl with a Turkish background had her throat cut by her father because he learned that she had a Christian boyfriend. Read last week, these kids that are being beat to death in schools in Egypt, right? Teacher, you didn't learn your lesson. I beat you till you're dead. Justice? You know what? In that article, it said statistics from the United Nations Population Fund reveal that more than 5,000 women are victims of these so-called honor killings each year. Dr. Amin Muhammad of Memorial University in St. John's is quoted in that article as saying this. He said, in different cultures, they can get away without being punished. The courts actually sanction them under religious context. Justice? Yeah, go ahead and kill your family because they were victims. Is that justice? But along with these places and situations where there seems to be a complete and bewildering void of justice, there is also the reality that people too often find, or at least perceive, that the justice system, even here in a nice democratic society, is unpredictable, if not at times downright questionable. Something else from my files, January 9, 2007, there's this article from the USA Today entitled, "There Ought to Be a Law." And it describes some of the wacky warning labels that were compiled by a group called the Michigan Lawsuit Abuse Watch. This stuff is just amazing. One label warns consumers that fellow human beings shouldn't be placed in washing machines, cautioning them against rinsing and spinning people, even on the gentle cycle. So it's not okay on the gentle cycle. Don't put your brother in there. Some other examples, a warning against drying cell phones in microwave ovens. Don't try that. A warning against using an open flame to check the fuel level on power boats and jet skis. What do you think, Bob? Do you think there's any gas in there? Why don't we just light up a flame? Oh my goodness, there is. Look at that. I can't see anymore. Really? A label on a kitchen knife warning, never try to catch a falling knife. Remember that. Never try to catch a falling knife. Oh man, and a label on bobcat urine. You might wonder, why would I want bobcat urine? Used to keep rodents away from garden plants. Label on there actually says, not fit for human consumption. Don't use that stuff to spice up your samosas, or your rice and beans, whatever. I wonder if I should drink this stuff, man. One more, a label on a baby stroller warning, remove child before folding. There's a lot that could be said there, but have you seen our son, kid? Where did he go? Oh, I folded him. Yeah. The point is that these labels wouldn't be necessary. This organization is saying, come on, these labels would not be necessary if the legal system wouldn't allow frivolous lawsuits to move forward. They wouldn't have to spend millions of dollars to figure out they need to put these labels on bobcat urine. Come on. People of the world need the assurance that the Lord who reigns will also judge righteously. In the face of brutal dictators and oppressive regimes, in the face of the excesses at the expense of the vulnerable. People need to know the good news that the reigning God is not open to bribes. He is not influenced by wealth or position. He does not play favorites. And he will stand and defend people of any and all nations because he loves every single one of them. His judgment will be based on consistent principles. And that is an important message because it tells of a present and a future reality. And yes, while people have the right to not acknowledge the Lord's reign as king, the fact still stands that in the end, he is the judge. Ultimately, all individuals of all nations will stand before him and will answer to him. Our fate and our future rests in his hands alone. It is his call, and when all is said and done, judgment is based on his principles, on his rules, on his priorities, on his opinion, on his viewpoint, on his perspectives. There is no trial by jury. There is no court of appeal. But that's okay. Because as a righteous judge, his perfect knowledge is combined, thankfully, with his loving and merciful concern for us. It's okay. And to demonstrate his fairness, what does he do? He lays it all out. All of the details, all the evidence and reasons involved in the judgment. And that allows every being in the multiverse to see that his decisions and his judgments are indeed righteous. They are in line with his perfect, pure, truthful, loving character. He shows in everything that he is working for the best eternal outcome of everyone. So we need to talk religion and justice to the world. And when I think about that, I can't help but remember the first angel's message in Revelation 14. Remember those three angels' messages that should be so front and center and important to us as a movement of people? Remember that first angel's message in Revelation 14? What does it say? Fear God and give glory to him. That's religion and politics. He reigns. It says, for the hour of his judgment has come. That's religion and justice. He judges righteously. And then it says, and worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea and springs of water. That's religion and science. That he created and holds the world in place. See, we are not just another flavor of Christianity, or we shouldn't be. As a divine end-time movement of people, part of our calling is to share this unique and important last days message with the world. It calls people to worship God as creator. It informs them that the process of judgment has begun. And really that is good and hopeful news that we are able to share in the realm of religion and justice, that we have a creator who reigns and is judging righteously. So it's good for us to gather like today and worship and praise. We gather together as fellow believers in a place, a warm place, but in a place. But these words here in Psalm 96:10 remind us of our mission, that there is a message that we need to help spread among the nations. We have to think about taking it beyond these walls to the world. That's our call. And frankly, that is a big, big, big job. It's only doable with divine help. And you know what? It's not always necessarily easy or well received or comfortable. In fact, sometimes it is downright dangerous, which means that it requires for us to use care and wisdom to know what to say and to know when and how to say these important things. But we are called to be a voice in this world. We are called to be willing to talk about religion and politics. We are called to talk about religion and science. We are called to talk about religion and justice. We can share a message that in the fear and uncertainty and chaos and danger and unpredictability of life in this world, there is someone overall who is in charge. We can let people know that someone does hold this planet on course. Someone who sees and knows and understands it all, who will sort things out appropriately and truthfully and fairly. We can share that message. The Lord reigns. The Lord reigns. Man, the Lord reigns. As an organization, as a congregation, as individuals, we need to think and pray about how best to say and show that the Lord reigns. Right now, as an act of dedication, I want to invite you to join me in singing it. Because as I was preparing this sermon, there was one song that just repeatedly marched back and forth through my mind, and it's a song I would like us to sing in closing in commitment. It's a song called He Reigns. You might not know it, but you'll know it by the end. So whenever you're comfortable, join in and sing. So stand up. Time to stand up. Let's sing together. He reigns.